Hello everyone and welcome back to the Florida Relocation Guide. If you're watching here on YouTube, thank you, and thank you also if you are listening on the audio only version. My name is Adam Hancock if we have not had the chance to meet. In today's video, I kind of had like a three reasoning purpose for why I think it might be valuable. One, so why would you want to get in early beyond like just the obvious? Like why focus on trying to get an advantage over other people or over the builders or whatever it may be? I think number one is early. I mean, there is a lot of pricing advantages to phase one because the community is taking a little bit of a chance. They're trying to fund this thing. They're trying to see how many contracts can I sign so I know kind of how to pace the different phases. And you can take advantage of that. You can also ride equity waves, things like that. Two, I think there is the idea of missing out on an opportunity. I mean, there are communities that a lot of people really like at certain times, but maybe don't like at all in other times. So being cognizant of kind of where this community is tracking might give you a lot better idea of what you could do eventually. And then three, I think, is the ability to be patient. We are in a market and going and probably continuing on in another market in the future here that a buyer can be poised, and a buyer has not been able to be poised in Florida in a long period of time. If you know what currently exists from a new construction standpoint, you know what's coming next, or at least an idea of what's coming next, then you can say, okay, great, well, I'll be fine now. I'll be fine 2 years from now if I want to wait, but I don't need to wait, so I'll jump on an opportunity if I want one. But I don't have any sort of fake urgency or a push from behind in order to do something that maybe me and my family are uncomfortable with. That's the idea of the video. I hope it does that for you, potentially. So we're just gonna hop right in. Make sure you check out the new Home Geeks audit that we just launched. That's gonna be a great next step for a video like today's. Somewhere out in the first couple minutes, maybe a few times throughout this video, I'll run my little quick reel explaining what it is. And yeah, I think that basically does it. So let's begin with number one. All right, number one on my list, in no particular order, kind of, is history is a great indicator of what any of these guys are gonna do in the future. One of the biggest benefits, amongst many things, to the Southwest Florida market is the density of new construction options with limited amount of builders that play in the Pareto of the 80+% of them in a relatively small geographical area. I mean, you have Tampa Bay, you have Sarasota Greater, you have Naples, Fort Myers Greater, but the heavy majority of it exists in the Sarasota Manatee County districts, which is one of the smaller metros amongst everything you could possibly do. So we see patterns in an insane way. And even like a state like Texas, where you have like the number 1, 2 new construction markets with Houston and Dallas per capita, it's not done in the same exact way, and it's a much vaster, for lack of better words, or lack of real words, area. So I just kind of want to rattle down through a few examples, which we'll talk about real communities and that kind of thing to illustrate this point, and we'll be a little bit more brief than the last couple of videos. I'm gonna hop to my whiteboard real quick. So, take a really great example of this, and that's why I talk about the same builders frequently, is the Taylor Morrison company, Taylor Morrison Homes. So they put out homes through brands, and one of those brands is Esplanade. So they came to Lakewood Ranch and they did a community called Esplanade Lakewood. So they built the middle of Lakewood Ranch, and then they go up to the northwest of it. And they build this first district. The high school's there, you have Central Park, you have all these communities, Mallory Park. And they built Esplanade Lakewood Ranch. Deeded golf, beautiful, right? So you get golf that just for you and the other members most of the year. Not all of them are golf rights. They built 1,500 homes. Half of them are social membership. You have a swim-up bar at the pool, a restaurant in addition to that. There are spas, commercial-sized gyms. It's, elegant. And it's built with a builder that isn't a custom builder, so you get a lot of perspective affordability. They do a condo product, villas, single families across many different lot sizes, right? People really like that because there wasn't really anything like that in Lakewood Ranch, and they had the country club and stuff like that, but from a golf perspective, there wasn't something like that at the time that released. Towards the tail end of that, because that's not the oldest community in the world, they go over here and they say, we're gonna build an area called Azario, just to the right of it, just to the east of it. So now you start to have these Lakewood Ranch quadrants. They go here, and they just went right next to it. But where can we go next if we also own this land? And they build an Esplanade at Azario. And look what it is. It is deeded golf, about half social, half golf and social memberships. Very similar. They would send you here to walk the amenities to see what these are going to look like. They don't do the condos in here, which were like, fees aside, you could get a condo for under 200 grand. But they do the villa, and they do a bunch of single family collections, really narrow, like 45 foot, 52, they do 60s plus, and then here they even did 76 and 90 foot lots with the Beacon and Lincoln. But you could basically say, what was this? I can't do this anymore. What's this gonna be? And then how close are these to each other? You get this close in geography, you're talking one road, this close in geography, then you're saying, how much chance am I actually taking? Because the only thing that changes is timing. But now people know more how awesome this was. So you might have more competition doing this, and that's what we saw a lot of times like that. To me, this is all about mitigating risk. I mean, all the value comes with the mitigation of risk. So then you say, okay, well, so both Lakewood Ranch, well, then you have Central Sarasota. They build an area called Sky Ranch. They're just kind of coining these new terms, but they do an Esplanade here. And a lot of times they'll say, okay, well, this isn't for everybody, right? This is really bougie. A lot of times it doesn't say it, but it kind of leans maybe to a 55, over 50 crowd potentially because of the lifestyle location. Then they branch off a community right next to it. That's why there's an area. Esplanade's not the area. Esplanade's the brand at the area. So they can do another community next to it, maybe a little bit more affordable, more two-story plans, stuff like that. Park East at Azario, Esplanade Azario. Well, Sky Ranch, Esplanade Sky Ranch. What is Casilla at Sky Ranch? So when you're saying, okay, the Esplanade's not for me, what you can do is you can go to multiple areas, compare the same builder with its own brand, and see how does the builder price against itself on the different communities. Now, there are going to be timing differences and maybe slight amenity differences, but it's not materially different from a town perspective. So a lot of the education of new construction in general can come from a builder telling you what it thinks the value is of different parts of town against itself. Does it view Central Sarasota as a more premium location than northeastern Lakewood Ranch? If the answer is yes, is it actually not that different when it comes down to it because this one has golf, this one doesn't, and you can kind of hop around like that. So that's one thing I really like. And then as I digress on the Taylor Morrison real quick, just a further illustration, this is the predatory take advantage lane. So two new communities that are coming are Esplanade, kind of in between here, Esplanade at Waterside, which has not released yet. So one of the sexiest district of Lakewood Ranch, one of the best locations of all of Sarasota, in addition to all of Southwest Florida. Not going to have golf, but you're probably going to have the social membership only about size of this community here. So you get a community that some would deem as a negative location because it's one of the further communities in Lakewood Ranch to town. Fixed location, lose golf, know even more than you knew before. And so they start releasing Aroma, and you see a Lazio and a Farnese and a Plaza. You're like, all right, I know what this is. Well, then you can say, well, I really like that Welland Park, Venice area. Well, what's coming next there is Esplanade at Welland Park. I've been talking about that a lot on the channel. It's going right next to a golf club called Mayaca Pines. That's old school. And they've announced this like 860 homes. That is almost exactly 50% of this social membership. So, then you got these two, you're going to be able to shop kind of against each other in two different locations. And will they price this cheaper because it's in Englewood versus Waterside? And you do that like a couple times, and you're dangerous amongst every real estate agent in all of Sarasota and Manatee County combined, I bet, as a buyer remotely sitting in New Jersey on that one exercise. So I don't want to get crazy here, but we can do this time and time again, right? So in Lakewood Ranch, they build Neal Communities, builds Indigo. Well, what is Windward in Waterside with Neal? What is the new Palm Grove on State Road 64 in Lakewood Ranch? What is Grand Park in Sarasota? What is Grand Palm sorry, I'm terrible at a whiteboard. What is Grand Palm in the original Welland Park? What is Avelina? And you kind of get the point here, right? In the new part of Welland Park. What is Wisteria? And how different are the floor plans really? You can call them different things, but you can say, what is the Savannah 2 and the Kiowa and all these kind of things. But go right now, you should take an exercise right now. Go right now and see what the pricing of the Kiowa and the Savannah 2 are in Grand Palm in the Venice corridor. And see what the closeout pricing is at the same models at Windward. That tells you, there's a little bit of age, but that tells you what Northern Venice versus Lower Lakewood Ranch would be. And same with DeVosta, right? So I've been talking about Talon Preserve and Beach Walk. These are two Pulte-owned brands, which I talked about in a video a couple weeks ago. DeVosta is amenity rich. It's almost like the Esplanade of Pulte. Nokomis, Florida, north of Venice Island, south of Sarasota. Northern Englewood, really close to the beach, hence the name. But before that, they built a community called Island Walk, which is also in Venice, closed out. That was the belle of the ball before any of this existed. Well, what is Mallory Park in Lakewood Ranch? Which was also the belle of the ball when it came to families in Lakewood Ranch. So you could go to all these places, you could see, again, pricing against each other, but what did these people that bought early, what did they sell it for a couple of years later? A lot of these homes have turned over multiple times. So we're talking original price in a really incentive-heavy market. When these were built, you didn't have what you have today. And equity. Like a lot of what you should try to do as far as if you want to make money or you want to at least mitigate risk, is you need room to potentially sell this to the next person, and maybe even that person sell it to the next person with a slight rise up. And that's going to guarantee you equity. And a lot of it can be, you can feel good about by seeing what they've done in the past to see has it already hit its ceiling. All right, I'm going to kind of combine my number 2 and my number 3 on the list of 5, because I do think you start to cannibalize a little bit when you get into these points. But it rolls off the back of history. So one is infrastructure progress. Just like community tracking, that is not unrelated to the entire section of a town or the master plan that they're going to go with. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about, you can not only follow what people are going to do next, but you can also say what's missing from what's currently available. And the combination of these 3 could be really interesting. So I'm going to go over here for a second again, not to be kitschy, but this is the way that I like to learn. So if we say, we'll just call this master plan and missing. You could say, okay, Lakewood Ranch, they built the middle first, right? Fruitville Road, University Parkway, State Road 70, 64, so that's kind of how it goes. And then you have we won't do Tamiami Trail, but you have like the interstate, Lakewood Ranch Boulevard, Lorraine Road, kind of, U-Line, Bourneside. So they built Lakewood Ranch in the middle. This isn't to scale, obviously. So you have like a Summerfield community, you have Greenbrook, River Club, Country Club, East and West, and they're kind of building this middle section. Lake Club. And then that quadrant I was mentioning, the first place they went is up here. So you have like the high school up here, Mallory Park, Indigo, Central Park, Savannah, but you have a bunch of communities up here. Well, you have this whole quadrant. This was the most, and I don't know at the time how much you would have been able to predict this. This was the most obvious, because there was already, the Esplanade. There was already bleed over. Like, it's not like they finished this. They're like, all right, what should we do next? They go here. There's a community that's going to pop up, a little bit here and here. So knowing what they did here and knowing this middle section was a little bit more mature, this was the natural choice. You could get closer to State Road 70 and all that, but you had to go to the east. The idea with Lakewood was west was already a thing, east, until recent history, So you go like a bunch of Lennar communities, like there's like Polo Run, you have Lakewood Ranch Golf and Country Club, which was Lennar. They build this, one of the new ones is Lorraine Lakes. You have Sapphire Point over here with Pulte. Sweetwater came out later. Star Farms came out later. Palm Grove is going to go over here. And then they're saying, okay, the schools are getting kind of full with like Gullet and Lakewood Ranch High School and Mona Middle and all that. And so schools, new communities, it gives you another option of what this district was deemed as more family-centric, perspective affordability, because it's not down here. This was a lot of like the original Lakewood Ranch crowd. A lot of the people that, were raising families and stuff topped up here because they wanted new construction. That's all you had at the time. Well, so if you had any idea that this was going to happen, then even if it's not the exact same community, they're very similar. Like Pulte, Taylor Morrison, Neal, you get these guys. If they were over here at all and they did this, it would be very similar, even if it's not called the same thing. And then they go down to the Waterside District, down here for the first time, and they build Windward, they build Lake House Cove, and they build Shoreview. Homes by Town and other people, Pulte, Neal. Neal had Indigo that you can compare, like I mentioned before. They're just right here. There's these huge lakes all around. They just had the 3. So people are juxtaposing this against this. That was the main conversation at the time. This is almost built out, or like the last phase of the Lake Club, stuff like that. Well, you have a road, like, so you say, okay, Lakewood Ranch Boulevard, the interstate, I get it. Everybody's driving over here, east to west, to go down, to get closer to like, so you basically get over here, you get to Fruitville. That's the traffic patterns, and then you get to town. You can't take the interstate to town. So you got to go east to west. So if you're just higher up, all you're doing is over, down, over, basically. And that was like why it's good or bad, because you're up here and you got to get to the interstate or Lakewood Ranch Boulevard. You got to run down. Only way to get to the beach or downtown Sarasota is to go Fruitville. If it takes you longer to get there than this, which one's worth more money, basically? That's the whole idea of the whole town in the grids. Well, you have Lorraine Road right here, which is a mirror of Lakewood Ranch Boulevard, more or less, and then the interstate. So, which gets more interesting with time, and you have these, like the Isles, Lake Club, concessions over here, and then University Parkway, whatever. But next to the Waterside District, you had this other huge set of lakes right here behind a bunch of brush that no one could see. So what they basically did is they built out more of this. They went Avanti, they went Neil's signature community is called Alcove, Share Lake, they go Nautique, Emerald Landing with David Weekley, Kingfisher Estates, which is the Peacock, John Cannon community. They have this other road, so you have this Waterside district right here. Well, what's going to happen next with Waterside? They just go right here. They're just mirroring the whole thing again. So Lake Club's getting burnt out, they build Wild Blue. Lake House Cove's getting sold out, they build Shellstone over and over. But this is, even though the communities are moving, it's an infrastructure. And then it's a combination of what is missing at the time. So when they just have these 3 communities in Waterside, it was cool, but it was like, some reasons it was simpler. You know, it was just binary. You were like, okay, am I doing Lake House Cove or I'm going to Esplanade? Windward, people didn't know how to feel about it yet. There's no other real Neil you could do at the time. Shoreview was like an expensive version of Pulte, wonderful land, but so you could see how like maybe none of this works. That was my conversation I was having 2.5 years ago. Everybody loved Waterside. Everybody loved the idea of it, for schools aside, to be in Sarasota County and in Lakewood Ranch at the same time. You get this beautiful downtown. You're like, how much do I even need to go to Sarasota if I have all this? But like, if one of these didn't work, you were out. They build all of these, and you're like, oh, that's cool, but they were like a bunch of peacocks. You know, Avanti is a really small Neil community. Alcove had no amenities, Neil signature, 46 homes. Nautique had more, 75% townhomes, the rest single family, all MI homes. Emerald Landing was like the city collection from David Weekley. You could see how this also wouldn't work. And you're like, that didn't really solve the problem of this not working. It just added more options. And so then you're like, okay, well, maybe it still doesn't work. Well, if you love the Lake Club, nothing satiated that need. Wild Blue got close to it. So if you would have seen Wild Blue, you're like, all right, that's the next Lake Club. Lake House Cove, people really liked at the time. Eventually it sells out, right? Well, then Shellstone, you see that and you're like, okay, Homes by Towns master planning something and Lee Wetherington's in there. Is that not the Lake House? Is that not Lake House Cove, you know? So that's kind of where the land that was available and what wasn't there yet would add value, if that makes sense. And then just another random point. So on a map, you can see that there's a community right now called Monterey. So say 4 months ago when we didn't know the in-between, well, the Lakewood Ranch map, it was almost like laughable. I think my thumbnail for the video when I talked about it was showing this. There's nothing here. So you're like, people didn't even, you drive people out to Monterey, they're like, where am I? It felt like complete country, even though it's not that far. It's in Lakewood Ranch, it's on their map. Well, the reason that there's a gap is because a 5,000 home, multiple community section called Lakewood Ranch Southeast is coming to this. They've already announced it. I heard Pulte owns 1,000 of those lots. I think Monterey's included in this number. Taylor Morrison, that Esplanade community, is going to be a part of that. So you can kind of see like, all right, if you heard that's coming and you have a bunch of Pulte examples, you have a bunch of Taylor Morrison examples, you're like, oh, okay, well, now it makes sense. Like, they're not ignorant. Like, this isn't privately owned land that no one's developing. That's not why Monterey's far, because it's the bookend of what's not there yet. And once it's announced and everybody gets excited about it, and I found out about the builders in there early, but once everybody knows, just like when Waterside was built and downtown Welland Park was built, you're going to have a lot more competition because people don't want to take the chance. If you want to take advantage of a big opportunity, a lot of times that you have to at least try to take a calculated sacrifice. And that's why I speak about mitigating risk so often, is because I don't like to take chances at all. But how many chances are you taking if you go to the right town, you don't get weirdly far, and you know a lot about new construction? I don't think you take a lot. So I'm not going to get crazy here, but just expand that point in your mind. Like, look at what Central Sarasota is right now. The Sky Ranch area, 11 miles parallel to Siesta Key. Lakewood Ranch is up here. This is over here. And so then the shape of the town, the beaches, all that kind of stuff. Well, there's not a lot there. That's the problem with Central Sarasota now. It doesn't look like Lakewood Ranch. It doesn't look like Welland Park. People go boom, and they're like, what's in between? What if I don't like Taylor Morrison? Artistry is kind of done. Well, if you've ever heard us talking about 3H Ranch or Hi-Hat, they're trying to pave the way for basically to have a Central Sarasota, 5,000 plus home master plan area. I've heard Pulte has permits in there, Lennar has permits in there. So if you say, Taylor Morrison's there now, Neil is a little bit there, but a separate community. I wouldn't count the artistry community as being combined with that. Who do you think would go to that community? If Taylor Morrison's already announced that Sky Ranch will now be like 3,000 plus homes, who else do you think would possibly go there based on everything they've ever done? Like, what's the chances Pulte's also there? And Lennar, and possibly D.R. Horton, and all these same guys, So that one's a little bit out in the future, but if you want to get in real early, and you say, if a lot of what Lakewood Ranch and Welland Park was in Central Sarasota at the same time, would I have chosen it? or did I not? Because I would have, that location wasn't available to me because they don't have master plan. Same with Welland Park down in Venice. They're not even halfway done yet. So where could they possibly go based on what they've already done? The more you can find out about that, it's gold information. And if the answer to that is they can only go south and they can only go east, then you might want to look real heavily, that's why timing matters, at communities that are central. Like when the Playmore District's done, are they going to get further from Sarasota or closer? If the answer is further, then you have to, in your mind, say, what is the value of Englewood? What is the value always been of Englewood? How much am I taking a chance? And if you think you're taking a chance, then you should try to buy the prime areas now, in my opinion, based on the information you have at the time. A unique one that's not unique to us, but just in general, if you can obtain this information, is we're the new home reps, the people that work for the builders, especially the people that have worked for the builders for a long period of time. Their plan is to continue on with the same company where they're moving. That's a great way to find out information. They always know a little bit earlier when they're leaving one community to go to another, and the best ones, that's why we try to work with the same people frequently, not only for the experience, right? This kind of realtor stuff is just so clunky to me. Like, my whole history of work wasn't more on the finance side than real estate. So when I got into it, it seemed like there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I think all the cooks are helpful if arranged correctly. So we try to work, and it's actually quite pleasant, so we try to add value where a person that works for an individual builder can't. But we work in combination with them, so you get the best of them and the best of us, potentially. And in doing so, if we try to give all of the business to the same people repeatedly, so everybody knows more, the experience is more seamless, we're synced together, it's not a bunch of clunky stuff. I could send you by yourself a lot of times, and you could do what you need to do there and then speak to us about it after, stuff like that. So anyway, that's how I find out a lot of information, because of those relationships. Well, I know the gentleman that works for Taylor Morrison that's opening the Esplanade at Welland Park community. We know when, the people leave Shoreview and start the Del Webb Catalina and things like that. This is a great way to find out when floor plans are going to release. This is a great way to find out if there's going to be inventory homes that come out with the start of a community that you can get advantages to, and just in general, right? This is a simple point. We don't have to beat it to death, but a lot of it's a small community, actually. It feels like there's a billion of them, but the majority of them, maybe they went from Taylor Morrison to the Pulte Company or something like that, but a lot of the reps end up at certain places because of a couple conduits. A couple of people that have been there a very long time that kind of head up all the new communities and have brought other good people with them to backfill the other communities. So I always try to share that information. A lot of the information that I get to add to my videos, that's more than a thought exercise, I get from stuff like that. And I think it's good for everybody, right? It's not like an opportunity that doesn't exist to anyone else in the world necessarily, but it's an opportunity that if you weren't ready to hear the information at the time, you were told something awesome but too early, then maybe you'd regret that later potentially. So anyway, that's one. And then my fifth one is, I think, it's kind of a big, just your tolerance. This all sounds good and well, but what is your tolerance for jumping on something with a limited amount of information that you have at the time? A lot of people will take, if you look at like the Seaflower community right now, what do you think that buying in Western Bradenton, 3.5 miles of the beach, but buying in Western Bradenton, do you think that's a risk? Do you think you can learn enough about the town to feel good about the decision and have a kind of a no regrets, where if you get in there, you're like, it would have been awesome. I thought I was going to make $200,000 of equity. I didn't, but I'm still fine. Would you be able to do something like that? Or would you rather say that these people can go after High Hat Ranch and 3H Ranch and Beach Walk and Seaflower? I'm going to buy an absolute slam dunk. I'm going to try to buy, either in Waterside or something like this at a community that's been built a million times. I don't have kids, so school zones don't affect them. That's something that I see come up repeatedly. And, there's levels of it. There's things like where there's amazing opportunities, like the people that made $1 trillion during COVID. I don't think they knew quite what was going to happen. They just happened to be liquid enough and in a position where they could do something like that. But then there's also a year removed from that, there were still opportunities. Some of these new communities in the market we're in right now, like you're probably looking at this thing saying, I still think it's going to drop. And there's probably levels of your correctness in that. Those are my 5. So I hope that potentially helps you and your family get an early opportunity. Our newsletter that we send out bi-monthly is a great resource for this kind of thing too. This is where I get on a 30-day loop of trying to send like incentives, things like that. Any video, things like this that I kind of ramble a bunch of these communities. I'm trying to give real examples, but timing is a thing. A lot of these, like the Grandora floor plans that I talked about a couple weeks ago, the 28 home Southern Sarasota Pulte community, those just released. So, all that information kind of flows in, and you could have seen that video and be like, that's interesting, lose track of it, and you don't see the floor plans release. When is Esplanade, the Mayaca Pines, Esplanade Welland Park going to open? Should you wait on stuff that might release? A lot of that information, we could give you a lot better idea. I could ask people if, have they told you yet? Just, my customer doesn't want to buy in October if you're going to release November 1st, things like that. So food for thought. All our contact information is everywhere. Again, check out that new Home Geeks audit before you head out. And thank you once again for tuning into the Florida Relocation Guide. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. A lot of value videos planned for the balance of the year, and that's just the best way to see what's coming next. We have relocation guides on the website as well, written word versions of the videos. There's an audio only link in this description for not only this video, but you can actually subscribe to that. We're on iTunes, I think, too. We don't really promote it, but I do think audio only experience is nice. YouTube, if you're consuming in your car or something, you have to have YouTube Premium. You can't watch it in the background. I like the audio. I mean, I draw on a whiteboard constantly, so you gotta take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, any way you want to get involved with us, if we can help you. I own a real estate brokerage, so we have a very controlled experience. It's boutique. The most amount of people you're going to work with is me and one or two other total people, but I think they're the smartest people in the room, because again, all the transactions are pushed in a repeated fashion through a very small amount of people. And so everything that you're gonna do, they've done 1,000,000 times, and they're currently working with people that are just a couple of steps ahead of you. So please consider that. Thank you guys so much for consuming any of my content. We'll see you on the next one.